The massive ship Nexus Prime floated in the dark space between stars. Inside its gleaming halls, beings from across the galaxy gathered for another day of peaceful discussion. Ambassador Zethkar stood tall on his 6 legs, his blue skin shimmering. Under the soft lights, he spoke to the council about the wonderful state of their civilization. "For 3,000 years we have settled our differences like civilized beings," Zethkar said. His voice echoed through the chamber where dozens of alien species sat listening. "When we disagree, we duel with honor. When we compete for resources, we negotiate fairly. Violence is something we left behind long ago." The other ambassadors nodded their various heads in agreement. They were proud of their peaceful ways. War was messy and primitive. Smart beings found better solutions. Far away from this peaceful meeting, Commander Jake Sullivan sat in the captain's chair of the Earthship Ranger. The bridge was smaller than the grand chambers of alien vessels, but it felt like home to Jake and his crew. The walls were painted a simple gray, and everything had a practical, no-nonsense design. "Commander, we're picking up a distress signal," said Lisa Barnes from her station. She was the ship's tactical officer, a sharp woman with short brown hair and quick eyes. "It's coming from the outer rim about 6 hours away at full speed." Jake leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of signal?" Federation frequency replied. Sam Rodriguez from the engineering station. He was a stocky man with calloused hands who could fix anything that broke. "Sounds like they're in real trouble." Amy Carter, the ship's medic, looked up from her medical reports. She was young but experienced, having served on 3 different ships before joining the Ranger. "If they're calling for help, they must need it badly. Federation ships usually handle their own problems." Jake made his decision quickly. Set course for the signal. Maximum speed. The Ranger turned and jumped to faster-than-light travel. Jake had been in space for 15 years, first as a fighter pilot and then as a ship commander. He had seen enough trouble to know that distress calls usually meant someone was about to die. 6 hours later, they dropped out of faster-than-light travel near a Federation research station. What Jake saw made his blood run cold. The station was under attack by ships he recognized as Kethmori raiders. These aliens were known throughout the galaxy as brutal killers who took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. "Lisa, what's the situation?" Jake asked. Lisa's fingers flew over her controls as she scanned the area. 12 Kethmori attack ships surrounding the station. 3 Federation defense vessels, but they're retreating. Retreating? Jake couldn't believe it. The station is still under attack. "According to their communications, they're following standard procedure," Lisa said, listening to the radio chatter. "When outmatched by superior numbers, Federation protocol calls for orderly withdrawal to minimize casualties." Jake watched his screen as the Federation ships pulled back in perfect formation. They moved like they were performing a dance, keeping their distance while the raiders continued destroying the research station. Escape pods were launching from the station, carrying civilian scientists and workers, but the Kethmori weren't just destroying the station, they were hunting down the escape pods and destroying them one by one. Jake watched in horror as raiders shot defenseless civilians who had already surrendered. "They're killing the researchers," Amy said, her voice tight with anger. "Those people can't fight back." Sam slammed his fist on his console. Federation ships are just watching it happen. Jake felt something hot and violent rise in his chest. This wasn't war as the Federation understood it. This was murder. "Lisa, can we take on 12 raiders?" "Not in a straight fight," she replied honestly. "But sir, we don't fight straight." "Fights." Jake smiled grimly. Lisa was right. Humans had learned to fight differently than everyone else in the galaxy. "Sam, how fast can you modify our mining lasers? Give me 10 minutes and I can turn them into weapons that'll cut through Raider." "Armor," Sam said, already moving toward the door. "Amy, prepare for casualties." "This is going to get messy," Jake said. Then he opened a channel to the Federation ships. "Federation vessels. This is Commander Sullivan of the Earthship Ranger. We're moving to assist." The voice that came back sounded shocked. "Commander Sullivan, you are greatly outnumbered. Standard protocol requires withdrawal when facing impossible odds." We cannot provide adequate support. Then don't, Jake replied, cutting the channel. The Ranger moved toward the raiders at full speed. Jake knew his ship was smaller and less armored than the enemy vessels, but it was also faster and more maneuverable. More importantly, his crew thought differently than any other beings in the galaxy. Sam, are those weapons ready? Jake called over the ship's communication system. Ready to burn holes in anything that gets in our way. Sam's voice came back. The first raider ship turned to face them, probably expecting another orderly Federation retreat. Instead, the Ranger dove straight at it, firing the modified mining lasers at point-blank range. The Raider's shields collapsed instantly, and the ship broke apart. 1 down, 11 to go, Lisa said, already targeting the next ship, but Jake wasn't done with conventional tactics. Lisa, launch all our mining charges. Set them for proximity detonation. Sir, those aren't weapons, Lisa protested. They are. Now, Jake replied. The Ranger released dozens of mining charges, devices normally used to break apart asteroids. Lisa had reprogrammed them to explode when enemy ships came near. The Raiders, expecting normal weapons, flew right into the trap. 3 more ships were destroyed in the explosions. The Federation vessels watched in amazement. As the small human ship tore through the Raider formation, the humans weren't following any known tactics. They seemed to be making up their strategy. As they went along, Sam Rodriguez had left his engineering station and was suiting up in a spacesuit. Commander, I'm going outside. What? Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. That damaged Raider to our port side? I can get aboard and take it from the inside, Sam explained calmly. Before Jake could stop him, Sam had launched himself out of an airlock and was flying through space toward an enemy ship. The Raiders were so confused by his appearance that they didn't even shoot at him. Sam landed on the Raider's hull, cut through it with a plasma torch, and disappeared inside. Minutes later, the Raider ship turned and began attacking its own allies. Sam's. Taking control of their ship, Lisa announced, amazement in her voice. Amy Carter had armed herself and was preparing to board damaged Raider vessels to look for survivors. She moved through the wreckage of the battle like she was taking a walk in a park, completely focused on her job of saving lives. The remaining Raiders began to retreat, something they had never done before in their long history of violence. But the humans didn't let them go. Jake pursued the fleeing ships, destroying 2 more before they could escape to faster-than-light travel. When the battle was over, the human crew had rescued every single civilian from the research station. They'd also captured 3 Raider ships intact for intelligence gathering. Federation vessels approached slowly, their crews struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. Ambassador Zethkar received the battle recordings later that day. He watched them 3 times, each viewing making him more disturbed. The humans had fought like wild animals, but with the intelligence to coordinate complex strategies. They had used their own ship as a weapon, sent crew members into hand-to-hand combat in the vacuum of space, pursued a defeated enemy instead of accepting their surrender. Most disturbing of all, they had seemed to enjoy the fight. While other species viewed combat as a necessary evil, these humans appeared to thrive in the chaos of battle. They adapted their tactics moment by moment, turning mining equipment into weapons and using their enemies' own ships against them. Zethkar realized that the galaxy had encountered something new and terrifying. These humans didn't fight to achieve military objectives or to gain honor. They fought to utterly destroy their enemies and protect innocent lives, no matter the cost to themselves. 4. The first time in 3,000 years of galactic peace, Ambassador Zethkar felt afraid. 6 months had passed since the battle at the research station. In meeting halls across 1,000 worlds, alien leaders watched the same battle recordings over and over again, trying to understand how such a small ship had defeated so many enemies. The Great Council Chamber on the Federation. Capital World was packed with representatives from every known species. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center, his blue skin darker than usual with worry. Round him sat beings with scales, fur, tentacles, and stranger features still. All of them shared the same concern. We have called this emergency session to discuss the human problem, Zethkar announced. What we witnessed 6 months ago challenges everything we believe about civilized warfare. A door at the back of the chamber opened, and 3 humans walked in. Representative Kevin Morgan led the group, a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. Behind him came Colonel Beth Parker, wearing the simple green uniform of Earth's military forces. She moved like a predator, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. The third human was Dr. Ryan Webb, scientist who studied alien life forms. Kevin stepped forward and bowed slightly to the assembled aliens. Honored representatives, we come in peace to answer your questions about humanity. Admiral Vexwin of the Aquarian Defense Fleet stood up. His body was covered in blue-green scales, and gills opened and closed on his neck as he spoke. Your peace means nothing if your war is so terrible. Show them the recordings. A large screen descended from the ceiling and began showing images that made many aliens look away. The footage came from human military training exercises on Earth. Human soldiers were fighting practice battles. Using kitchen knives as weapons when their guns ran out of bullets, they turned farming tools into spears and used broken furniture as shields. This is how your warriors train, Admiral Vexwin said, his voice full of disgust. They prepare to fight with anything they can find. Even children's toys become weapons in their hands. Kevin nodded calmly. That's correct. Humans learn to adapt and survive using whatever resources are available. Another alien stood up. The Fel3 of the Silicon Collective looked like a walking crystal formation, her body sparkling with internal light. But why? Other species use proper weapons and follow established tactics. Why do humans fight like savages? Dr. Webb stepped forward to answer. To understand human warfare, you must understand human evolution. Earth is unlike most worlds that produced intelligent life. Our planet tried to kill us every single day. Gestured, and the screen changed to show images of Earth. The aliens saw massive storms that could destroy cities, volcanoes that buried entire regions in ash, and earthquakes that split the ground open. They saw footage of predatory animals with teeth like knives and claws like swords. Humans evolved surrounded by natural disasters and deadly predators, Dr. Webb explained. Our ancestors had to be ready to fight for survival at any moment. Those who could not adapt quickly died. Those who gave up when things looked hopeless died. Only the most stubborn and creative humans lived long enough to have children. Surely civilized beings can move beyond their primitive origins. Colonel Parker stepped forward with a slight smile that made several aliens move back in their seats. Would you like me to demonstrate the difference in our thinking? Before anyone could object, she walked to a tactical display that had been set up for training purposes. The display showed a hopeless military situation. A small group of defenders was surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces with no hope of rescue and no way to escape. This is a standard tactical scenario used in Federation military academies, Colonel Parker announced. The correct answer, according to your military doctrine, is to calculate the most honorable terms of surrender that will preserve the most lives. She studied the display for 30 seconds, then began pointing to different locations on the battlefield. Here's how I would handle this situation. First, I would use the defenders' medical supplies to create improvised explosives. Second, I would have them dig tunnels under the enemy positions using their eating utensils. Third, I would have them fake a disease outbreak to make the enemies come closer to investigate. The alien military officers in the chamber stared at her in shock. She was turning a hopeless defeat into a complicated victory using nothing but common supplies and creative thinking. Fourth, she continued, I would use the defenders' communication equipment to hack into the enemy's command structure and turn their own weapons against them. Fifth, I would have the defenders pretend to surrender, then detonate the medical supply explosives when the enemies came to accept the surrender. Colonel Parker turned to face the stunned aliens. The scenario assumed my forces would lose. I found 17 different ways to win instead. That's the difference between human and alien military thinking. Counselor Veltheri's crystal body flickered with nervous energy, but the casualties would be enormous. Your own forces would suffer terrible losses. Better to lose half my soldiers winning than to lose all of them surrendering, Colonel Parker replied simply. Admiral Dexwin's skills flapped rapidly as he struggled to understand. But the honor code. The rules of civilized warfare. You ignore everything that makes us better than animals. Kevin stepped forward to calm the situation. We don't ignore honor, just define it differently. Human honor comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves, even if it costs us everything. Dr. Webb added, other species evolved in stable environments where cooperation and negotiation were the keys to survival. Humans evolved where the environment itself was the enemy. We learned that sometimes the only choice is to fight or die. The chamber fell silent as the aliens tried to process this information. Then alarms began blaring throughout the building. Emergency lights flashed red, and automated voices announced a crisis. A communication officer rushed into the chamber, his face pale with fear. Representatives, we have received reports from the outer galaxy. Something is attacking our colonies. Entire star systems are going dark. Admiral Dexwin rushed to a communication console and began receiving updates. His expression grew more horrified with each report. Ships the size of moons, technology that adapts to our weapons instantly. They're not taking prisoners or demanding surrender. They're consuming everything. How many systems have we lost? Asked Ambassador Zethkar. 12 systems in the past month, the Admiral replied. Our fleets can't even slow them down. They retreat in good order when outmatched. But these invaders don't seem to understand retreat. They just keep coming. Kevin looked at Colonel Parker and Dr. Webb. All three humans wore the same expression of grim determination. What do you need from us? Kevin asked. Counselor Valthari's crystal body was pulsing with rapid flickers of light. We were discussing placing humanity under quarantine. Your methods of warfare are too dangerous for civilized space. And now? Kevin asked quietly. The chamber was silent except for the continued emergency alarms. Finally, Ambassador Zethkar spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Now we may need to learn from you. Colonel Parker nodded slowly. The Federation has spent 3,000 years learning how to fight honorably. But honor doesn't matter if everyone you're trying to protect is dead. Dr. Webb pulled out a communication device and began contacting Earth. I'll request immediate military assistance. But you need to understand something important. When humans fight to protect others, we don't fight to win. We fight to make sure the threat never comes back. Admiral Dexwin looked at the tactical display where Colonel Parker had turned defeat into 17 different victories. What have we gotten ourselves into? Kevin answered, for all humanity. You've learned that sometimes the most dangerous warrior is the one who refuses to lose, no matter what it costs. The emergency alarms continued to blare as the Federation realized they were about to unleash something they didn't understand to fight something they couldn't defeat. The Federation Council met in emergency session for the 7th time in 2 weeks. The news kept getting worse. 23 star systems had gone completely dark, as the invaders, who called themselves the Devourers, seemed unstoppable. They consumed everything in their path like a swarm of cosmic locusts. Counselor Valthari stood before the assembled representatives, her crystal body flickering with desperate energy. Our finest admirals have tried everything. Traditional fleet formations, defensive positions, even our most advanced weapons. Nothing works. The Devourers adapt to our tactics within hours. Ambassador Zethkar paced on his 6 legs, something he only did when extremely worried. The Aquarian Defense Fleet lost 300 ships yesterday. The Devourers turned our own weapons against us somehow. They learned our communication codes and used them to coordinate attacks on our rear positions. How is that possible? Asked Representative Cleth of the Mantoid Empire, clicking his mandibles nervously. Intelligence reports suggest they have. Some kind of collective mind, Admiral Dexwin explained. When one Devourer ship learns something, they all learn it instantly. Every battle makes them stronger. The chamber fell into worried silence. Then Counselor Valthari spoke the words everyone was thinking but nobody wanted to say. We need to ask the humans for help. The reaction was immediate. Half the representatives began speaking at once, their voices mixing into a chaos of fear. in protest. The idea of asking the violent humans for military assistance terrified them almost as much as the Devourers did. "They fight like animals," protested Ambassador Zethkar. "We've seen the recordings. They turn everything into weapons. They sacrifice their own people without hesitation. And they win," Admiral Dexwin said quietly. "When was the last time anyone defeated the humans in battle?" The answer was never. In the 6 months since first contact, humans had fought 17 different conflicts. Pirates, raiders, and rogue military groups had all tried to test Earth's defenses. All of them had been completely destroyed, not defeated, not driven off. Destroyed so thoroughly that they could never threaten anyone again. Representative Kev Morgan entered the chamber with Colonel Beth Parker and Dr. Ryan Webb. The 3 humans looked calm despite the crisis swirling around them. Kevin walked to the center of the room and waited for the alien chatter to die down. "We received your request for military assistance," Kevin said simply. "Admiral Chris Henderson is already on his way with a task force." Counselor Velthari's body pulsed. "With nervous light, how many ships is he bringing? We'll need at least 1,000 vessels to have any chance against the Devourers." Colonel Parker smiled, and once again several aliens moved back in their seats. "Admiral Henderson is bringing 12 ships." The silence that followed was complete. Finally, Ambassador Zethkar found his voice. 12 ships? Against an enemy that destroyed our fleets of hundreds? 12 human ships, Dr. Webb corrected. "There's a difference." Admiral Henderson's task force arrived 3 days later. The aliens who came to observe the human vessels were shocked by what they saw. The ships looked nothing like the sleek, elegant vessels of Federation design. They were blocky, practical, and covered with weapons that violated every treaty about civilized warfare. Captain Nicole Torres commanded the destroyer Phoenix, a ship that had been modified so heavily it barely resembled its original design. Captain Danny Kim led a squadron of vessels that had started life as civilian cargo haulers and mining ships. Now they looked like floating weapons platforms. The crew members were equally surprising. Tyler Brooks was supposedly an expert, but he spent his time turning ordinary cargo containers into massive bombs. Megan Ross worked on cyber warfare using techniques that Federation computers couldn't even understand. Alex Stone specialized in something called psychological operations, which seemed to involve driving the enemy insane with fear. Admiral Henderson met with the Federation Council to review their tactical data on the Devourers. The aliens expected him to study the information carefully and develop a measured response over several weeks. Instead, Henderson spent 20 minutes reading their reports, then stood up and announced he was ready to fight. "That's it?" asked Admiral Vexwin. "You've seen enough?" "I've seen too much," Henderson replied. "Your people fight like you're trying to solve a mathematics problem. These Devourers fight like they're trying to eat the galaxy. Only one approach is going to work." Within hours, the human ships began modifications that made Federation engineers sick to watch. Tyler Brooks was installing explosive charges throughout the civilian vessels, turning them into giant bombs that could be detonated manually. Megan Ross was ripping apart communication systems to build devices that shouldn't have been possible. "What are they doing to those ships?" asked a horrified Federation observer. "Improving them," Colonel Parker replied. "The first battle came when a Devourer scout force entered the Kepler system. 3 Federation fleets had been destroyed trying to defend it. The human task force moved to intercept with tactics that made no sense to alien observers. Instead of forming orderly battle lines, the human ships scattered in all directions. They used asteroid fields for cover, something Federation doctrine said was too dangerous. They coordinated through rapid communications that sounded more like a pack of hunting animals than a military force. Captain Torres led the Phoenix in a direct assault on the largest Devourer ship. But instead of firing from a safe distance, she flew straight at the enemy vessel at maximum speed. Federation observers thought she was going to ram it, which would be suicide. Instead, she passed underneath it and fired every weapon at point-blank range into its weakest section. The Devourer ship exploded, but Torres wasn't finished. She immediately turned and began pursuing the smaller enemy vessels, hunting them down one by one. When her weapons ran out of ammunition, she started ramming damaged Devourer ships with her own vessel. Captain Kim's squadron fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They used their cargo containers as weapons, launching them at enemy ships and detonating them remotely. When the Devourers tried to adapt to this tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. Megan Ross managed to infiltrate the Devourer communication network using a technique that should have been impossible. She began feeding false information to their collective mind, making them attack their own ships. Had never encountered this type of warfare, started destroying themselves in confusion. But the most terrifying moment came when one of Danny Kim's ships took critical damage. The crew had minutes before the ship exploded. Instead of evacuating, they flew directly into the middle of the Devourer formation and detonated their vessel as a weapon. The Federation observers watched in horror as human crew members volunteered. For what was obviously a suicide mission, they didn't just accept death. They embraced it as a way to hurt their enemies. "Why did they do that?" whispered Ambassador Zet. Quotes KAR. Dr. Webb answered without looking away from the battle. "'Cause destroying the enemy was more important to them than their own survival." The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Devourer scout force. Not a single enemy ship escaped. But the cost had been terrible. 2 human ships were destroyed and 43 crew members were dead. Admiral Henderson's reaction shocked the Federation representatives. Instead of mourning the losses, he immediately began planning the next attack. "The Devourers will adapt to what we did today," he announced. "Tomorrow, we'll have to fight them differently." "How can you be so calm?" asked Counselor Veltheri. "Those people died." "Those people died winning," Henderson corrected. "And they died making sure the Devourers can never threaten innocent civilians again. That's what human warriors do." Admiral Vexwin stared at the tactical recordings of the battle. "You fight like the galaxy is trying to kill you," Henderson nodded grimly. "Because it is. We're going to kill it back." The Federation Council realized they had unleashed something they didn't understand to fight something they couldn't defeat. The question now was, which force would prove more dangerous? To the galaxy's future? 3 months into the war against the Devourers, the galaxy watched in fascination and growing horror as human forces changed the nature of warfare itself. What had started as a desperate defense had become something far more terrifying. The humans were not just fighting the Devourers. They were hunting them. Captain Shane Williams led his strike team deep into Devourer territory using tactics that Federation military computers could not even calculate. His ship, the Wolverine, had been modified so many times that it looked more like a weapon than a vessel. The crew moved through enemy space like ghosts, appearing where they were not expected and vanishing before the Devourers could respond. "Target acquired," announced Lieutenant Grace Powell from her station. She was 25 years old and had volunteered for missions that veteran soldiers refused to attempt. Today she was preparing to do something that would have been considered impossible by any other species. Shane studied the massive Devourer hive ship on his screen. It was the size of a small moon and contained millions of enemy creatures. Federation doctrine would call for a fleet of hundreds of ships to even attempt an attack. Shane was planning to destroy it with a crew of 12. "Grace, are you sure?" "About this plan?" Shane asked. He had to ask, even though he already knew her answer. Grace smiled as she checked her equipment one final time. "Captain, someone has to get inside that ship and plant the charges. I'm the smallest person on the crew and the best at staying hidden." What Grace was planning violated every rule of civilized warfare. She intended to hide inside a damaged human ship that would appear to be floating wreckage. When the Devourers brought the wreckage aboard their hive ship for study, she would emerge and begin sabotaging their systems from within. "Remember," Shane told her, "you don't have to destroy the whole ship. Just create enough chaos for us to get in and finish the job." Grace nodded and climbed into the specially prepared cargo container that would keep her alive in the vacuum of space. Shane's crew launched the fake wreckage toward the hive ship, then waited. If Grace failed, she would die alone in the heart of enemy territory. If she succeeded, she might still die when they destroyed the hive ship. The Federation Observers watching from a safe distance could not understand what they were seeing. "They're sending one person to attack a ship containing millions of enemies," whispered Ambassador Zethkar. "This is madness." Dr. Ryan Webb, who had become the Federation's expert on human warfare, shook his head. "This isn't madness. This is how humans think. They don't see impossible odds. They see a puzzle that needs solving." Inside the hive ship, Grace Powell worked her way through alien corridors filled with creatures that would kill her instantly if they found her. She moved like a shadow, using skills learned in the dangerous cities of Earth to avoid detection. Her mission was not just to plant explosives. She was gathering intelligence about Devourer technology that no one had ever seen before. Meanwhile, Engineer Roy Carter was developing weapons that made Federation scientists sick with worry. His quantum disruption mines didn't just destroy ships, it changed the fundamental nature of space itself, making it impossible for the Devourers to adapt their defenses. "How does this weapon work?" asked a Federation engineer, staring at Carter's latest creation. Carter grinned and continued working on the device. "It makes the atoms forget how to hold together. The Devourers can adapt to energy weapons and projectiles, but they can't adapt to having their matter spontaneously fall apart." "But what about the long-term effects on space itself?" the engineer protested. "This could damage the fabric of reality." "It's better a damaged reality than no reality at all," Carter replied. Installing the weapon on another human ship, the true horror of human warfare became clear when Dr. Janet Knox began studying captured Devourer technology. Instead of developing defenses against their weapons, she was learning how to use them. Her team had turned Devourer bioweapons into tools for infiltrating their collective mind. "We can use their own neural networks against them," Dr. Knox explained, to a group of horrified Federation scientists. "By introducing false memories and contradictory commands, we can make them attack themselves." "But that's using their biology as a weapon," protested one of the aliens. "It's like turning their own bodies against them." Dr. Knox nodded calmly. "Exactly. They wanted to consume our biology. Now we're going to consume theirs." The breakthrough came when Grace Powell successfully sabotaged the hive ship's communication systems. But instead of simply destroying them, she reprogrammed them to broadcast human psychological warfare techniques directly into the Devourer collective mind. Alex Stone had spent months developing these techniques. They were designed to drive the enemy insane with fear and confusion. The Devourers, who had never experienced individual terror, began to panic on a species-wide level. "What is happening to them?" asked Admiral Dexwin, watching as Devourer ships began firing randomly at empty space. "They're learning what fear feels like," Alex Stone replied. "For the first time in their existence, they're experiencing individual thoughts instead of collective ones. They can't handle it." Captain Bobby Chen coordinated the most complex battle of the war, using strategies that appeared to be complete failures but were actually elaborate traps. His fleet deliberately lost 3 separate engagements, appearing weaker and more desperate each time. The Devourers, growing confident, began concentrating their forces for a final assault. The Federation observers thought the humans were being defeated. "They're retreating again," Admiral Dexwin reported. "Captain Chen has lost half his ships." "Colonel," Beth Parker smiled her predator's smile. "He hasn't lost anything. He's been leading them exactly where we want them." The trap was sprung when Bobby Chen's apparently beaten fleet suddenly turned and attacked with weapons the Devourers had never seen before. Roy Carter's quantum disruption mines had been secretly deployed throughout the battlefield. When they activated, entire Devourer fleets simply ceased to exist. But the humans weren't satisfied with tactical victories. Admiral Henderson began planning something that terrified even his own allies. He wanted to take the war into Devourer home territory and end the threat permanently. "You're talking about genocide," Ambassador Zethkar accused during a heated council meeting. Henderson's expression was cold as space itself. "I'm talking about making sure they never threaten innocent people again. The Devourers don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They only understand complete destruction." "But there must be another way," pleaded Counselor Valthari. "Some form of peaceful solution." Dr. Webb answered her. "The Devourers have consumed 47 star systems and killed billions of innocent beings. They've made their choice. Now we're making ours. The Federation Council realized that the humans were not fighting a war in any way they understood. Other species fought to achieve specific goals. They captured territory, secured resources, or forced political changes. The humans were fighting to eliminate the Devourer species from existence. "You don't fight wars, Admiral," Dexwin said, finally understanding. "You fight extinctions." Henderson nodded grimly. "When something threatens the innocent, you don't just defeat it. You make sure it can never threaten anyone ever again. That's the difference between human warfare and alien warfare." Grace Powell finally emerged from the hive ship just as it began tearing itself apart from her sabotage. Shane Williams's crew rescued her seconds before the massive vessel exploded, taking 3 million Devourers with it. As Grace was brought aboard the Wolverine, she delivered intelligence that would change the course of the war. "Captain, I found their homeworlds. I know where they're breeding new armies." Shane looked at the data Grace had risked her life to obtain. Time to end this war permanently. The Federation representatives watching the human forces realized they had unleashed something far more dangerous than the Devourers. The aliens destroyed civilizations. Humans destroyed the very possibility of future threats. The question was no longer whether humanity could defeat the Devourers. The question was what the galaxy would look like when the humans were finished with them. The final battle began in the dark space between galaxies, where the Devourers had built their breeding worlds. Captain Laura Price led the human assault fleet toward targets that the Federation had declared impossible to reach. Her ship, the Titan, carried weapons that could destroy planets and the will to use them without hesitation. "All ships, this is Captain Price," she announced over the communication system. "Today we end the Devourer threat forever, not just for now. Forever." Behind her followed the largest human fleet ever assembled. 200 ships filled with crews who had volunteered for a mission they knew would cost many of their lives. But they also knew it would save trillions of innocent beings across the galaxy. The Devourer homeworlds were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Massive planets covered with breeding facilities that produced millions of new warriors every day. The Devourers had been preparing for total galactic conquest for thousands of years. Admiral Musk Anderson studied the tactical display showing 12 heavily defended worlds. Any other species would have needed 10,000 ships and years of planning. To attempt this assault, the humans were going to destroy all 12 worlds in a single day. "Laura, are your planet killers ready?" Henderson asked over the communication link. Captain Price checked her weapon systems one final time. Roy Carter had spent 6 months building devices that could crack a planet's core and cause it to explode from within. The weapons violated every treaty about civilized warfare, but the humans no longer cared about alien concepts of honor. "Ready to turn 12 worlds into space dust?" Admiral Price replied. The Devourers had prepared for this attack. They had built massive defense platforms around each world and stationed millions of ships to protect their breeding facilities, but they had prepared for a conventional assault by conventional enemies. The humans attacked in a way that made no sense to any military computer. Instead of targeting the defense platforms first, they went straight for the planets themselves. Captain Price's fleet dove through the defensive formations like they didn't exist, taking terrible casualties, but never slowing down. "They're ignoring our shields completely," reported a surviving Devourer commander. "They're willing to lose half their forces just to reach the surface." The human strategy was brutally simple. They didn't care about winning a space battle. Cared about destroying the Devourer ability to reproduce. Laura Price's ship took direct hits from dozens of enemy weapons, but she kept flying toward her target planet. Lieutenant Commander Jenny Adams led a squadron of fighters in a suicide attack on the largest breeding facility. Her pilots flew their ships directly into the alien structures, detonating them as weapons. Within minutes, facilities that had taken centuries to build were reduced to burning rubble. But the most devastating attack came from Dr. Janet Knox, who had learned to use Devourer biology against them. Her team released modified viruses into the atmosphere of each world, targeting the genetic material that allowed Devourers to reproduce. What are those biological agents doing? asked Ambassador Zethkar, watching the attack from a Federation. Observation ship at a safe distance. Dr. Webb answered without taking his eyes off the tactical display. They're making it impossible for Devourers to have offspring, ever, on any world, anywhere in the galaxy. The Federation representatives stared at him in horror. You're sterilizing their entire species? Or making sure they can never threaten? Innocent life again, Dr. Webb replied calmly. The battle raged for 18 hours. The Devourers threw everything they had at the human fleet, destroying 76 ships and killing thousands of brave warriors. But the humans never stopped. Advancing? When their weapons ran out, they used their ships as weapons. When their ships were destroyed, they continued fighting in smaller craft. Captain Price's ship finally reached the core of the primary breeding world. Her planet killer weapon punched through miles of rock and metal to reach the planet's center. When it detonated, the entire world cracked apart like an egg. One by one, the other human ships completed their missions. 12 Devourer worlds died in explosions that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Billions of years of evolution ended in a single day of human warfare. The surviving Devourer ships tried to flee. But the humans had planned for that too. Commander Paul Richardson led hunter squadrons that tracked down every escaping vessel. His orders were simple. No Devourer ship could be allowed to survive and carry the threat to other parts of the galaxy. Richardson to all hunters, he announced. Remember, we're not just winning a battle today. We're making sure our children never have to fight this war. The last Devourer ship was destroyed 3 days later. The species that had consumed 47 star systems and killed billions of innocent beings was extinct. Not defeated, not scattered. Extinct. When the human fleet returned to Federation space, they were met by alien representatives who didn't know whether to celebrate or run in terror. The humans had saved galactic civilization, but they had done it by completely destroying an entire species. The Devourer threat is eliminated, Admiral Henderson announced to the Federation Council. They cannot reproduce, they cannot rebuild, and they cannot return. The galaxy is safe. Ambassador Zethkar found his voice after a long silence. You didn't just defeat them, you erased them from existence. Henderson nodded. That's what you do to threats that cannot be reasoned with. You remove them permanently. The political changes began immediately. All species across the galaxy realized that their traditional military forces were completely obsolete. Captain Paul Richardson was assigned to train alien officers in human tactics. But most species couldn't adapt to the human way of thinking. You have to understand, Richardson explained to a class of alien military students, humans don't fight to win battles. We fight to end wars. That means being willing to do whatever it takes to make sure the enemy can never threaten innocent people again. A young alien officer raised his hand nervously. But what about honor? What about the rules of civilized warfare? Richardson's answer shocked the entire class. Honor is protecting those who cannot protect themselves. For games, this is survival. Dr. Webb published his research showing why human warfare was so effective. Other species had evolved in stable environments where cooperation was more important than aggression. Humans had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day, creating warriors who viewed total victory as the only acceptable outcome. Humans don't fight until they achieve their goals, Dr. Webb explained to the Federation Science Council. Humans fight until their enemies cannot threaten them anymore. That's why human warfare seems so extreme to other species. The new galactic order established humans as the military protectors of Federation space. Any species that started a war faced the possibility of human intervention. And human intervention meant facing complete destruction rather than honorable defeat. Kevin. Morgan negotiated treaties that formalized this arrangement we don't want. To rule the galaxy, he assured nervous alien leaders, we just want to make sure that innocent beings can live in peace. But everyone understood the unspoken threat. Peace would be maintained because war would bring human attention. And human attention meant facing warriors who fought like the galaxy itself was trying to kill them. Admiral Henderson established the Human Defense Doctrine, which became the foundation of galactic security. Any threat to innocent life would be met with overwhelming force designed not just to achieve victory, but to ensure the threat could never return. Years later, when young aliens asked their parents why humans were considered the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, the answer was always the same. Other species fight to win, they would explain. Humans fight to finish. They don't want victory. They want the war to be over forever, no matter what it costs them. And that makes them the most terrifying force the galaxy has ever known. The galaxy had peace, but it was a peace built on the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, human warriors waited to destroy anything that threatened the innocent. They had saved civilization by becoming something that civilization feared as much as it needed.